Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of the Unclassified podcast. We are your hosts. I am Ben Wheeler. I'm joined today by, I'm always joined by Preston Stewart. He's always here with me. In many ways, he's not joining me. He's just here, right? Because it's both of our shows. Anyways, guys, chat, pod. Last week, I was pretty fired up about Chicago being under military occupation, about the invasion of Texas. And I said some things that were 100% correct. And maybe my tone wasn't great. But I have to tell you guys, it worked. It worked. Trump has backed down. He is no longer sending the military into Chicago. Instead, he's sending them to Memphis, to New Orleans. He said, it's too hostile of an environment in Chicago. It's too hostile. We want someone who wants us there. Hell yeah, brother. Send them all the way down, way below the Mason-Dixon line. So the Unclassified podcast emerges victorious. Once again, it was us who did it. I think it was my strong rhetoric. And frankly, Trump ran like a dog from this great city. Ain't that right, Preston?
To Tennessee. I just want to to set the record straight here.
That's true.
Wait, I live in Tennessee.
Me to you. Yeah.
Wait, yeah. You're...
That is true.
I don't think you thought about that at all.
No, I was really hyped, and now I realize you're about to be under it. That's not
just down the road, man. I mean, more tied to Nashville here than Memphis, and Memphis is a mess. It's I don't know about the crime situation there. I understand. I've seen some stats recently that says it's really bad. I haven't spent a lot of time in Memphis. I've driven through a few times. Went to a VFW event there a couple of years ago. It's not a great city. It's not like one of those cities you go through and you're like, this would be a cool place to live. It's kind of the opposite. I think it was like gloomy out the times I was there too. So I don't know. That probably paints a negative picture. But yeah,
what even is in Memphis? Elvis? Not anymore.
Barbecue,
but like his house.
Barbecue. Ducks Unlimited, I think, is there, right? Right on the Mississippi River. So
yeah,
I don't.
So you have barbecue, Dead Elvis, and the Mississippi River. I guess
good basketball traditionally. Yeah,
maybe it's a trap because as we discussed last week, and I'm getting on a flotilla, which by the way, apparently not safe to go on flotillas anymore. I mean, they blew up Greta's allegedly. I don't know if that's true or not.
I think it was a flare. I think they shot a flare, and it.
Oh, they did.
Yeah. I think I think it was literally a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Well, yeah. So if anyone, I'll tell you what, if anyone were to set their boat on fire with a flare, it's definitely me. So
also, just to clarify, if you think that if you mistake a flare for an AGM-114 Hellfire being fired from a drone,
yeah, you gotta be pretty dumb.
Like, what is that little fire over there in the corner? It must have been a drone strike.
That kind of probably explains why I never saw the aftermath of it. I just saw like the video cut out as like the flashing light came down, and I was like, damn, that's crazy. That could have been me if they were over the Mississippi.
Yeah.
So
right. Real thing.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry that I sent it down your way. But no justice till Preston's free. From the river to the sea, right? Preston Stewart will be free. So, because the Mississippi River goes to the Gulf of Mexico, so river to sea. Anyways, Preston, you had a big week this week. Big week. Frankly, maybe one of the biggest weeks. You were in New York City at a terror conference. You were learning about terrorism. And what'd you think of that? How was that?
Yeah, we'll have to work on the phrasing there. The biggest part of the week is today, actually, in the Stewart household. So my wife, Megan, we're closing down our daycare center. It's been open for about 4.5 years at this point. And it's what I'm so proud of her. She's there right now, seeing the last families come in. And it's a drop-in daycare that she stood up from scratch. Her sister was the kind of manager. And they built something awesome. And they've gotten so many really, really nice notes from families and the community in recent days. It was a tough decision, but kind of bittersweet. It was time. We'd kind of been right on the line. We'd been technically profitable since it began, but not enough. It wasn't enough to sustain, and costs kept going up. Our insurance went up 350% in the last 2 years. Just as carriers are looking at daycare providers differently and some state licensing changes. And we decided that it'd be better suited to move on. And we're doing that. So it's bittersweet. But I'm so proud of her, and her sister and the employees there. Just really, really cool what they're able to do. So yeah, that's today. Our
Shout
daughter's
out to
going over for a
Megan,
little bit. Yeah,
number
shout
one
out to
fan.
Megan. She'll listen. She will listen. She's a friend of the pod.
We're proud of her. We think, frankly,
Yeah.
no one's done it better.
So really
Does
cool.
it make you feel like, no offense, not to hype up Megan too much, but wasn't she like a doctor before this? Does it make you feel like a little bit of a dork? You're like, yeah, my wife's a doctor, runs a daycare, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm a podcaster or a
I make
YouTuber.
videos on the internet.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. No, she's definitely the smart one in this relationship, without a doubt. She went to medical school. We met while she was in medical school. Then began a surgery residency. So she was a general surgeon up in Grand Rapids for a couple of years, and then while there, decided that that was not what she wanted to do. Didn't want to work the 90 hours a week and be away from family all that time. So stepped back, and we've gone the route of trying to start and run businesses. And she's done that, I'd say, successfully for the last 4 years. And it's just really cool to see. So I don't know what she's getting into next, but I'm excited to see the direction it goes.
She should launch a sister podcast to ours, and we'll call it Classified, because we're unclassified. Call it Classified. There you go.
I told her she should just get hyper partisan and pick a direction and just say, like, just go all in. There's a lot of money to be made either direction. Yeah, just like whatever you're feeling. You don't even have to believe it. You know, I think that's the key component here is you just kind of pick a direction and go. I don't think she's going to do that. She's a good person.
Do you feel like we missed the boat? Like we could have very easily just got the talking points from the White House or whatever under any given administration, and then just like rolling the dough, just telling people what they want to hear. Do you feel like we missed the boat?
Joking aside, I don't think I could do that. It would feel so, I don't know, in a sense you're lying every day, right? Yeah. Like if you're not saying what you believe, or you can't stand up for anything you believe, you're lying. I don't think I could have slept at night doing that, but it's pretty crazy that we all recognize that that's a thing and it continues to work, which is probably a bad sign for where we are right now. But
ain't that the truth? Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I don't do anything I don't want to do. And so I definitely would not be able to repeat talking points I don't want to say.
It must just be I think it's a mix. Like, it's so easy to jump to the financial upside, and I'm sure there's some of that there. And I would actually argue that, especially when making content for the internet, there is your upside in terms of viewership and audience, I think, is higher if you take a strong stance in a very controversial direction. I don't know that, I don't know if that's real. I don't know that's a lot to debate there. I don't know that the financial upside is so high, but I think there's a kind of a core tribalism feeling of wanting to fit in that we just all have in some way, shape, or form. And I think sometimes content creators feel that need, and I'm sure I've had it. It's a power. It's a force that is out there. And I think that's probably part of it as well, of just wanting to be a part of a team.
I fully agree with you. I also think people want to be part of a tribe. It feels like there's a proximity to power that you can gain, right? Like those influencers on the left got invited to the White House, you know. On the right, everyone gets to be around Donald Trump, right? There is a proximity to power to achieve, but I think people often mistake proximity to power for actual power or gain. Because as soon as you're not useful to the parties, they just throw you to the side, and they will keep on chugging. So, I mean, speaking of which, people were asking us this week. They said, when are you guys going to announce your dual bid for president and vice president of the United States? I don't know, man. I don't know. Well, I'll tell you what here. This is the other part of your big week, because people were saying this. Preston went on Philip DeFranco's in good faith. It was the best interview I've ever listened to. And I think the best interview Phil's ever done, and Preston. So definitely go listen to that. But in the comments there, people are saying, when is this guy going to run for office? He would win like Reagan. That's an exact quote. They're saying, Preston, if you ran for office, you'd win. People, I mean, are you going to pull a Sherman on him? If drafted, I will not accept it. I will not run. Are you going to do that? Or are you going to be like, if the people need me, I'm here? Because I think people the cries are growing louder, man. Tennessee needs Preston Stewart.
It's I don't. It's not. There's no zero plans to do that. And maybe this is too pessimistic of me. I try to be so optimistic in so many different ways, but I don't know what you accomplish doing that. Everything's just like, what power does a new representative or a new senator have? They don't do anything. They all just, like, I don't see anybody in Washington doing anything. It's pretty singular executive at this point. I don't. You put yourself, you put your family through the wood chipper is the word I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And to what end? Like, I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks there's almost more influence to be had in the private sector like this than a junior representative that doesn't do anything and has zero influence, zero power, and strictly goes along with party lines no matter what, because they have no alternative apparently. I don't know.
See, I disagree. I think this is a story not very many people know. But way back when, about, I think 21 years ago, not today, but will be in like a month or two, a young junior senator was elected in the state of Illinois. And people thought, wow, this guy's pretty bright. People thought he reminded him, looking at him, he reminds me of you. And people say, oh, what power comes with being a junior senator? Well, 4 years later, actually, hold on, I need to correct myself. It was 19 years ago this man was elected to be a junior senator of Illinois. And then 2 years later, he ran for president and he won. Okay. And I think that could be you, right? Barack Obama, nobody thought he could do it. He was just a guy who wrote books. And now you're just a guy who does a podcast, but now you could be a senator. See? I feel like David Axelrod right now, talking to a young Barack, okay?
All right.
Being like, you got this, Barack Stewart. Anyways, now our last thing before we get to like things that actually matter, this Doug the Pug thing, dude. People are following you around the internet. They're following me. They're saying, I can't believe you associate someone lost to Doug the Pug. I mean, the entire comment section over on Philip DeFranco are people saying, at least you got here before Doug the Pug, that dog, dude.
He made an appearance. I got to check the DM who it's from, but I got a DM on Instagram. I'm going to pull it up right now.
Do you get DM from Doug the Pug?
No, it's better than
I know
that.
in these times people are going to say, turn down the temperature. No, fuck Doug the Pug.
Oliver Ruth sent me a DM from this new movie John Cena's in. John Cena? Cena?
Hold on. You don't know who John Cena is?
I don't know how to say his name. I know who he is. I don't know. Is it Cena?
Cena, yeah.
Cena.
Yeah.
That was about the same. He goes on a rant where he mentions Doug the Pug should be in prison in his new movie.
John Cena does.
Yeah.
That is so real. Friend of the pod right there. Okay.
Yeah, Oliver Ruth coming through.
Shout out.
And John Cena.
Yeah. That's crazy. I mean, I'm glad the hate's spreading, Doug the Pug. I can't stand that thing. Anyways, so Preston, things that matter. NATO was ruthlessly attacked by Vladimir Putin this week. What happened? Give us down on a fundamental standpoint here.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to dive into this. I think for starters, what we know is that around 19 drones were fired from Russia. Some went through Ukraine, some went through Belarus, and ended in Poland. Mixed about how many were shot down, how many were destroyed with electronic warfare versus how many just crashed. We did get a fair number of pictures showing the ones that impacted on the ground. No casualties. It looks like one Polish home was effectively destroyed. But in those drones, it looks like they were all decoys, as in no explosive warheads, which means they could have been used for reconnaissance. I would argue that firing dual-use drones over enemy territory is a hyper-risky way to gather intelligence. If they were really trying to get low-level intel on that type of stuff, they could have turned those drones around and flown them into Ukraine. But every one of those had to be viewed as an explosive warhead targeting something in Poland. The fact that they did not have explosive warheads, to me, suggests that this was Russia testing the NATO alliance, not testing our air defenses per se, although that's probably a side benefit, but testing what will NATO do if we take this rather overt, although still denied to a degree, action of penetrating NATO airspace in what looks like these were explosive drones until they hit the ground. So it's a lethal attack until it's all said and done and you find out actually it wasn't lethal. So
Does that count?
I think it's very similar to, what happens if you launch a missile at a country and it falls short of the country. Is it still an attack? I would say yes.
It's kind of like the London Blitz. If they were just dropping sandbags out of the bombers, I feel like it's still a pretty big offense.
But even then, to me, this is a test, and it's a test of how strong is the NATO alliance. Because what Putin learned from this right out the gate is, first off, NATO will not launch retaliatory attack immediately. When we saw Russian drones flying in, the alliance in general waited and is still doing an investigation to find out what exactly played out here. So I think that is the right move, that we should not, at the hint of a Russian attack, let loose, fire and brimstone. There should be some thought involved there. But that was clearly articulated to Putin in our lack of actions at the time of the attack. Since then, I think it's gotten worse. I think this is a test that NATO failed. And there's been some member states that I think have done a good job. But the problem is this is a 32 member alliance. Everybody has to be on board. And if everybody is not on board, it shows weakness. And I think even a 1% chance that NATO does not follow through in protecting the alliance is a gift to Putin right now and what he was looking for. So what we have seen so far is some statements of condemnation, especially coming from Poland. I would say is probably the most outspoken, saying, in response to President Trump saying this might have been a mistake. Poland has directly said it was not a mistake. 19 drones, we've seen one at a time fly off course, get redirected by electronic warfare and loses its positioning, and it ends up in Polish territory. When you look at the flight patterns here, these did not fly off course. They were on course all the way to their target. The U.S. Department of Defense / War, whichever one we're going with today, has not said anything about it at all, which is wild to me. I think this is arguably the most pressing issue that has faced NATO, at least in my lifetime. Yes, we invoked Article 5. NATO invoked Article 5 following the September 11th attacks just 2 days ago and 24 years ago. And that was an awesome show of solidarity from across the alliance. But this is Russia attacking a NATO member, and we're sitting quietly by. I don't like where this is headed.
Do you think it's weird that the United States did not partake in the defense?
I don't think we have the full details on that quite yet. It looked an awful lot like just some open source accounts that I followed, that there were U.S. aircraft overhead during the course of the attack. But then the next day, the U.S. did not say anything about being involved, and NATO called out a bunch of other countries, did not mention the United States. You never know in this case if we don't want to be named, which could itself be a problem, or if we genuinely weren't involved, or if there's the possibility here. I do not know the disposition of NATO forces in Poland right now. It is possible that there are no U.S. aircraft that could have been utilized in this in NATO or in Poland right now. So I'm hesitant to read too much into that specific piece. A bigger one for me is that NATO has stood up this Eastern Sentry operation to protect essentially right now Poland's border with Ukraine from further drone incursions, and the United States was not named as one of the countries participating in that. So again, there have been cases, often with the Middle East and when it comes to Israel, where the United States might help or do something and we just don't want to be named, but everybody kind of acknowledges like we had to have had some role there. That's possible, but even that would be pretty concerning here because it shows there's some distance growing between the United States and NATO. I think that's hard to ignore at this point.
I fully agree. I mean, the fact that we're not openly partaking is insane because the whole, and I should say this, and this is my sincere belief, that NATO works to keep the peace because the United States is such an overwhelming force, correct? And our European allies are also very good militaries. They have a great stuff there, and I fully believe that they could take Russia. But I think if you're Europe and you're looking around, you go, all right, well, let's just light the candle. Let's just end the Russia problem, right? Let's get Russia out of Ukraine. The United States is not partaking. What's stopping you, right? What's stopping you from doing a no-fly zone and all that other stuff? And so the United States not publicly joining is only going to increase escalation for Putin. And I think it only brings us closer to war, both in Putin's calculations, but also if you're Europe and you're looking at this, you go, the longer this goes on, the stronger Russia becomes. Maybe it is. Maybe it's time. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think something that I've noticed people immediately say, like, well, Russia's not going to invade Poland. How are they going to get there? Or they're not going to launch a nuclear attack against France because of
They
this.
literally share a border of Poland, which is why I don't understand why people say that.
Like, I don't think that's the thing. That's not the next step here.
Mm-hmm.
What we have to keep in mind is the NATO alliance for its entirety has been viewed as this tight organization that is not worth testing. Russia has not tested this with military means and dropped bombs on Estonia to see what happens, or pushed troops across the border into Latvia to see how we respond. The concern has been, you know how NATO is going to respond, and it's not worth it to even test. Putin has operated his entire career under that belief. He carried out the war in Ukraine, is carrying out the war in Ukraine under that belief, that set of assumptions. His future plans for the Baltics, his current plans for the Baltics, his unconventional style of warfare, little green men moving into different numbers of countries, all of that is done under this belief that NATO is a tight alliance that will stand together. If there is even a hint of a fracture in that, that changes all of the thinking about how Putin goes around his ambitions in Europe. I don't know what percentage he would need to feel confident moving, say, little green men into Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, or maybe even Poland, and try to undermine the current government with more unconventional means, very similar to what we saw in Crimea and the Donbass. I don't know what Putin would need to see to feel comfortable doing that, but I have no doubt that watching the response over the last couple of days has made him more confident that he could get away with that. I think that's a problem. I think that's an unnecessary failure by, I'm going to keep saying NATO because it's an alliance failure. I do think at the core of that is the United States not standing up where we thought they were going to.
I fully agree. And you have to wonder, so what happens when the next drones are explosive? What happens if Russia tries something at the gap between Kaliningrad and Belarus? What if they do like a minor border incursion? Is Trump going to say, well, maybe it was a mistake? Is he just going to roll over and play dead? And the new policy that they have, this new national defense proposal, I don't know if when it becomes official or when they decide on that, just seems like they're just carving up the world, right? He's just like, well, you know, Russia can do whatever it wants. And I don't understand that because Russia is not a top tier country. They're not even top three. I'd argue not top five, not top 10. They are a backwater with a declining people who is unable to effectively wage a war, unable to control the world under any means other than social media algorithms. So I don't understand the need to bow to Russia here. They have ICBMs, sure. They have for how many years? 75 years, 70 years? What's the hesitation here? And I just think this is a dark path we're going down. And I hope Europe gives grace, but it's hard to say, when the United States is attacked, Europe and NATO, everyone has to bend over backwards to accommodate. And when Europe's attacked or our allies are attacked, if they're not named Israel, it's kind of just like, all right, go about your day, right? So I think, and I should say that is under this administration, right? The Biden administration is very vital to helping Ukraine, and I believe the Trump number one was as well. It is Trump 2 here that is weak on Ukraine. It's weak on Russia. It has no idea for the future, and it has mistaken U.S. hegemony as being the default rather than something we have to assert every day.
If you're Europe, if you're Russia, if you're Ukraine, you have to assume that the United States will not participate in the defense of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
like there was a stretch where, like at this point, assuming that the U.S. would do anything at all, I think is just a pipe dream. And you certainly can't plan based off of that, which is crazy because that's how the planning has gone for our entire lives, really since World War II. But if you want to read between the lines, or if you just want to see exactly what people are saying, none of it is suggesting that there is, I don't know what the line would be to where the United States would get involved, but it's not clear at this point. Secretary Hegseth, in an interview just the other day, stressed about how we've been projecting power overseas for far too long. Now we're going to be focused more here at home. And we're seeing that not just with his words, but with his actions. And I don't think you can separate that statement from happening the day after NATO was attacked. Like, there's just, again, if you're talking about life or death, the survival of a country, I think it would be, unfortunately, foolish for anyone to look at the United States right now and say that we will definitely come to their defense or even aid in their defense. I hate that. I think that's really bad for our country. I think that's bad for the world writ large. But if we're being rational, it would be a mistake to plan otherwise right now.
I fully agree. And I think if you're Poland, you're probably looking at nuclear weapons right now. Maybe, I mean, they threatened it publicly for the past 3 years, but they haven't under Trump 2 here. They have not done that yet. But also, if you're Japan, you're Korea, I don't know how you don't look at it and go, all right, because the crown jewel of American foreign policy has always been nuclear proliferation, right? It is always non-proliferation. It's always been, and that's the whole reason we have so many of these defense treaties, is that we can effectively stop other countries who would otherwise have nuclear weapons from obtaining them, so long as we pledge to defend them. And when we're no longer doing that, we are essentially doing a self-own, and that we're going to allow more countries to have nuclear weapons, and they will get them, and we will have no influence, because what influence do you need from the United States, especially in Europe, if they're not going to come to your defense, right? Why would you ever follow the United States around the globe, And same with Japan and Korea. This is, this whole, we export security, and in return, we get influence. That's how the deal works, and we're breaking that deal, and we're sending ourselves down a path of no return. And I think there are a lot of people who go, well, can't we just they say, well, after this is all said and done, can't we just go back and tell them JK? Yeah, we did that already. We did that already, and now we're back. And you can only JK once. If you what did George Bush say? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't get fooled again. That is exactly what's going on.
Get it tattooed, yeah.
Yes.
In the conversation with Phil a couple of days ago, something I brought up was that there's no coherent strategy that I can tell when it comes to our foreign policy right now. I mean, when you look at a lot of the statements from Trump on his campaign and from some of his senior officials since he's been in the Oval Office, a lot you'd hear NATO does not include Ukraine. So that's a Russian thing for Russia to figure out, or that's for Europe to figure out. Now we have Russia attacking NATO, and we've kind of shifted the talking points to, well, we're more focused here at home. So I got it. I think that is big picture, the end state, but I don't know that there is I'm starting to see less and less of this in the foreign policy realm, where I think people were optimistic at the start of the administration. There was a lot of trust the plan, wait and see what Trump has moving here, because he's always trying to make deals and there's so many things going on. But at some point, I think Ukraine is just a great example of this. The war in Ukraine, big picture, is there is no plan. I would love for somebody to sit down and explain to me this timeline and path of progress we've been on since Trump came into office, but I don't think it exists. It has been all over the place. It has been up, down, and sideways. And like that, to me, again, I'm open to ideas. I'm open to a different way of doing things. I'm open to a different strategy. Of course, I don't think we have a strategy. It is literally like every day we're going to try something different. And if it works, maybe. If it doesn't work, we just won't mention it ever again or give 2 weeks.
I fully agree with you. There's no
well,
strategy.
On that end,
yeah.
we got two more weeks. Should we talk about the Trump statement this morning about Russia and Ukraine?
Yes, let me pull it up here. So for the viewers at home, this was an interesting message we received. Well, he didn't personally send it to us, but we got it in our feed, you know. So,
Yeah.
would you like me to read it? I can read it here.
I don't think we should. I don't know. It's such
I won't
a
read it in his
rambling.
voice. A letter sent by so this is from Trump's True Social, and this is how he has titled it. A letter sent by President Donald J. Trump to all NATO nations and, comma, the world. I am ready to do major sanctions on Russia. So what frustrates me the most about this, before I can finish reading it,
We're not
is he
going to make
just
it through this. I
capitalizes
know it already. Yeah.
he capitalizes random words. He has sanctions capitalized here. I don't know why he did that, but anyways, I'm ready to do major sanctions on Russia when all NATO nations have agreed and started to do the same thing, and when all NATO nations stop buying oil from Russia. As you know, NATO's commitment to win has been far less than 100%, and the purchase of Russian oil by some has been shocking. It greatly weakens your negotiating position and bargaining power over Russia. Anyways, I am ready to, quote, go, end quote, when you are. Just say when. I believe this, plus NATO as a group placing 50% to 100% tariffs on China to be fully withdrawn after the war of Russia and Ukraine has ended, will also be of great help in ending this deadly but ridiculous war. China has a strong control, even grip over Russia, and these powerful tariffs will break that grip. This is not Trump's war. It never would have started if I was president. It is Biden and Zelensky's war, and I am here to help stop it. Save thousands of Russian Ukrainian lives. 7,118 lives lost last week alone. Crazy. If NATO does as I say, the war will end quickly, and all of those lives will be saved. If not, you are just wasting my time and the time, energy, and money of the United States. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. I will say that is true. I'm glad Trump finally said it. NATO doesn't want to sanction Russia. Nobody wants to sanction Russia. Trump this whole time has been saying we need to sanction Russia, and everyone else was saying no, we can't do that. You don't do that. Give him 2 more weeks. And Trump said no, we have to do it now. What do you think of that, Preston?
I got a lot here, man. I it's hard to square how if he lays the blame of this war on anyone, somehow Putin still avoids responsibility. I can't fathom that. Like, you don't have to say that at all. You don't have to say this war belongs to someone else. We can see how the war is being fought. I feel like I'm going crazy when I see these things over and over again. Like, we don't do that with any other conflict. He doesn't do that with any other conflict. But somehow here there's an aversion to placing any responsibility at all on Russia. It's like this, like they are both the most powerful country in the world and we have to bend to their every demand, but also like this war is just happening to them and they're the victim here or something. I can't for the life of me figure out. That is so frustrating.
Trump talks about Putin the way pit bull people talk about a pit bull when it mauls a kid.
I feel like there needs to be more said there. What do people say when a pit bull?
Well, they're always just like, oh, don't blame. How can you blame the owner, not the dog? They're always like, and I know that maybe it's a divisive thing to say, but it is how Trump treats Putin. Oh, it was everyone else around Putin, not Putin himself. I mean, come on.
Yeah. And we're not even going to get into the details of the war started in 2014. Yeah. That doesn't matter. When the only person in this group that was in power at all was Putin. All right.
That's true.
It's wild. Yeah. Lucky for him. He can just do whatever he wants and people blame it on everyone else. So I pulled up some stats here for the tariffs and the sanctions. The oil here, this is something that I do not fully understand because Europe does continue to buy fossil fuels from Russia. It has been decreasing, but it still exists. And to give a couple stats, and Ben, I'm going to ask your question on why this is still the case. Because the way he lays this out, I think it passes the common sense test. If you say, if Europe views themselves at war with Russia, they cannot continue to buy oil from Russia, helping to prop up their economy. I understand that point. I do not understand why that is so contentious. I have a hard time understanding the dynamics there. But for a little bit of background here, Looks like the three biggest buyers of Russian fossil fuels last year was China, India, and then Turkey. In terms of individual countries, inside the EU, the largest purchasers were Hungary, France, Slovakia, Belgium, and Spain in that order. I think Spain was like 66 million total in imports, which sounds an awful lot like it could be a rounding error. We should be able to wrap that one up pretty quickly. But number one, Hungary. Number three, Slovakia. I feel like we're probably not going to be able to get those guys to turn off the switch anytime soon. But France, Belgium, Ben, why is it controversial? Or I'm seeing people online present this as like it's dead on arrival because these countries won't stop buying oil. Why is that such like a ridiculous request?
So they have a plan. For most of them, they have plans to be off it by 2028. But the issue is that when you cut off supply, you can go through power issues. Also, you can increase prices. And it's not good for ruling parties if all of a sudden energy prices skyrocket. They're already outrageous as is, right? And so you do that, that's rough. The other part of it is that, the United States is selling a ton of natural gas right now, but they're not giving Europe a discount. They're like price gouging them, I would argue, right? So there's also that. And then when it comes to, we'll get to the tariff thing here in a second, but that's kind of it, is that they are planning on ultimately everyone's using it by 2028, and then hopefully not doing like price shocks and stuff like that, right? I mean, the reason why Germany might be opposed to this is because what happens? The price goes up and the AfD wins. I mean, is that really what anyone wants? I'm sure it's what Washington wants, but I don't think that's what anyone in Europe wants, So, those are the considerations here. It also is, Europe, they're trying to get off of it. And there's just an economic reality here at play. And so the demands to me seem probably should be closed door, but also it ignores what Europe's already been doing.
So the counter to that, I would say, is where I get a little bit like I understand the argumentation here that Trump is presenting, and I think it's going to go over well. You will hear this talking point, no doubt, in the near future, because that is saying that as significant as the Russian threat is, these countries view economic instability as a greater threat in the near term.
Okay.
They're prioritizing economic stability over the Russian threat. I think that's...
It's just hard to find. I mean, you're talking hundreds of millions of people here, and it's just hard to find a natural gas provider that can fill that hole,
I'm not arguing that. But I think what this does then is it's similar to the argument that we've heard around Ukraine when the conscription age was not lowered to 18. People said, well, wait a minute, if this is truly a war for their survival and they don't have 18-year-olds going to fight, what's actually going on here? And there's a lot of rationale behind that and debate behind that inside of Ukraine. But at a very high level, you understand how that raises confusion.
Mm-hmm.
So wait a minute, it can't be that serious if you're not even drafting your most able-bodied young men. And I feel like it's the same thing that will apply here, is this can't be as big a threat as you're saying it is if it's going to take you 6 years since the war began to stop giving the enemy money for their products.
I think that is true. I think the counter to that would be the United States continues to buy uranium from Russia. So, it goes both ways here. I do agree fundamentally with your point. I also think there's just a economic reality at play here that is hard to get around. Europe should have, they shouldn't have laughed at Trump in 2018 when he told them it's time to get off Russian oil, but they did. And now they need to work towards doing that. I don't think there's any doubt about it, but I don't know. He just kind of ignores the economic reality they're facing. And I mean, like, Europe is not fully at war yet. I mean, are they supposed to ask their people to... I know your point. If it's existential, you should. But currently, Russian troops are, still kind of held to the east of the Dnieper River, right? So until they start moving, I don't really see how Mertz can go to the German people and say, all right, well, we're going to have rolling blackouts, for the time being until Either the United States cuts how much they're charging us for natural gas, or until another country is willing to sell us what we need to sell. I just don't know how you can justify that to your people. And I understand both point of views, but there is, we often forget that other countries do have their own domestic politics, and there are gaps there. There are errors.
Can you talk about the tariffs a little bit then? Because that also was brought up
Yeah.
of all of these countries should impose 100% tariff on China, which we are not doing right now.
Yeah.
I don't think, right? Like I can't keep up with exactly
No,
the tariffs in every direction, but we're not at 100. Okay.
I don't think so. But the tariff thing is dumb because it's a very Trumpian thing to put tariffs on everything. I don't quite know why he's demanding that. In the EU's mind, the tariffs are too broad, too risky, and also it's just easier to sanction the entities you want and then be like, once this is over, we'll delist you once you stop doing what we don't want you to do. Tariffs is a bit insane, especially since you're right. We don't even have 100% tariffs on China. We could. It is demanding too much from people who you are also tariffing. Right now, we are tariffing Europe, right? We have like a trade deal, kind of, that each side says that they won or they got fleeced or whatever. But you're also tariffing Europe. Why now? All of a sudden they have to put tariffs over there, and what's the point here? It is. You ever have someone in your life who just they want, and they don't get a goddamn thing, and you don't get anything in return? You know, I guess for some that's a kid,
Are you
but
looking for? I was going to say, are you looking for a name or what's the?
no, 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 no.
Okay,
I
gotcha.
thought you'd go, yeah, but yeah, everyone has takers in their life, and you know, those most times they're called takers because they're not givers, and they that is what Trump is being right now. He's being a taker. He wants Europe to do this, this, and this. He couldn't even get planes off the ground to defend Poland. When these drones are coming across the thing, now he's like, you have to put 50 to 100% tariffs on India and China and Russia. Come on. What are we doing here?
Yeah, my gut says that this falls flat and it ends up being this kind of 2 week type thing that just fades away and we move on to something else. And then eventually he'll say, I've been trying to do this, but Europe won't get on board, is
Yeah, he's
probably
trying
the
to.
direction this goes.
He has
But
realized he cannot end this war. And so he also just want to portray his inherently pro-Russian position, his pro-Putin position. So now the only hope is to just blame NATO and Europe and say, well, they don't want peace. Well, I think the only person who doesn't want peace here is Vladimir Putin, because everyone else at the table does. So, you know, I do
make sure
fear for Norway though, because do you see that we're down to 6 wars solved now because the Democratic Congo, the Republic of the Congo, that war has reignited. So we go from 7 to 6. So I
that.
fear for what's going to happen to Norway when they don't get,
Oh man,
the Nobel Peace Prize here.
let me pull this stat up because I don't want to disrespect Poland,
Shout out.
but here we go. Poland is at are they at 5% now? They're at least at 4.5%. They were, as of last year, 4.5% GDP spent on defense. They are regularly one of the largest, if not the largest, spender on defense in NATO. What happened this week was a Russian attack against Poland. So one of the big talking points that we've heard from Trump is that kind of the suggestion that if these countries aren't willing to spend for their own defense, why would we commit to their defense on their behalf? And that was one of the arguments for getting everybody up to this new 5% threshold. I don't know how long it's been since Poland has met the 2%, but it's been a long time. And they are like the top spender in NATO in terms of percent of GDP. So like they are doing the things, and that's not new. Like they were doing that before the most recent frustrations with that. So if we're not showing a willingness to stand up alongside the ally that is spending the most per a percent of GDP, I think again, just another message to the rest of the alliance that like what chance do some of these countries, Spain, right, perpetually below the 2%, Canada below the 2%. Yeah, I'm not. That makes
It's almost like this is a thing under Obama. It's a thing under Trump 1. It's a thing under Trump 2. I think the only person who even correctly understood it was Biden, is that the United States has spent a considerable amount of time huffing its own farts about how all its allies need them more than the United States needs their allies. And now those allies are making it so that they don't need the United States, right? Pulling 5% here. I mean, they're going to have the largest, they may already have the largest land army in Europe. They are, I guess, after Ukraine, but they are going for it. And the longer this keeps up of like, I'm the king and nobody can tell me what to do and I can tell everyone else what to do, we're not going to, I mean, we're just screwing ourselves in the long term.
No, we got the dog back. Helly's back to her bed.
What does
comfy.
she think about Doug the pug?
We don't talk about that in this house.
Yeah, that's right.
When this show's off, she doesn't. Yeah, I don't want to disrespect her like that.
Yeah.
We've got some questions today to get to. In order to make time for the questions, should we hit on Venezuela or Israel? I feel like those are two outstanding ones with some minor updates.
Which one do you think is the best to do?
I think Venezuela. Bring it home.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's bring it. Let's bring it home. What's happening?
Not a lot has changed since that strike on the cartel boat, but not a lot of new information has come out. So Venezuela continues to kind of rattle their sabers. We're ready for a war. We're ready for a fight. And they are viewing this as an assault on them in terms of the Venezuelan government, I should say, and some Maduro supporters, of course, as well. They're hearing us say counter narcotics, and they hear we're going after Venezuela, which might be accurate. I mean, depending on who you listen to, a lot of people will, when they're asked the regime change question, they say, would it be so bad? Yeah, right? It's like a half-assed regime change, which there's no way. I heard, what was the guy's name? Brian Mast, right? Do I have that name right? Republican representative? He's the one. All right. Somebody went on, I think it was Newsmax last week, talking about Venezuela, and he was asked the question about regime change, and he said, look, it could be like Syria. We've seen how, a bad regime has fallen and the people have sorted it out. And it's like, bro, if we are using Syria as the example of people sorting it out, like, for Christ's sake, that was a 10-year brutal civil war, seeing ridiculous ethnic cleansing, and oh my God. And
come on, guys, it's just going to be like, Libya. Okay, come on.
Like, I don't know that we can point to Syria as a successful, like, yes, Assad is gone, but if that is our example of success, I feel like we need to really brace ourselves. But I mean, for Christ's sake, it's all like the rise of Islamic State and the export of global jihadism across the broader Middle East. And like, Jesus, the idea that is looked upon by anybody as a success for regime change is a little bit nerve-wracking. Just because they got a better place in the end, I don't think that should be the model. But getting sidetracked. Anyways, the big issue right now from what I'm seeing is the legality of the strike, and that's still not been addressed. And DOD has not done a press conference. They've not had any interactions. The only press has been Secretary Hegseth doing his regular Fox News interviews. He does one every 2 to 3 weeks. And it's just the tough questions aren't there of the legality of this strike. And a part of me says that really matters. But like you've heard me vent over and over again, I don't know that laws matter all that much anymore, unfortunately, which is a little nerve-wracking. But it sounds like the DOD or DOW, never going to get that right, gave a briefing.
Hold on, do we have to call it that? Can we just call it? It's still the DOD. They're just like,
I don't know. Can we get deplatformed if we say DOD instead of DOW?
I mean, they might send the shock troops here, but
dude, do you know what the Duffel blog is? Have you heard of that publication?
Yeah, isn't it like an Onion for military news?
Yeah, and they put out an awesome article last week. Let me pull up the title here. The Department of War loses access to $1 trillion DOD budget after name change. Son of a bitch.
That's pretty good.
But they gave a briefing to some lawmakers, and the lawmakers came out, and the Republican lawmakers did not provide any comments. The Democratic lawmakers said they didn't answer any questions. They didn't know who was on the boat. They didn't know where the boat was going. They didn't know the nationality of the people on the boat. Like, they didn't provide any of this information. And the DOD in response essentially said, yes, we did. And we gave you all of that. I don't know what to do with that information. It's clearly not public, but it's these conflicting stories of, we knew everything, but we can't tell you. Also, they didn't know everything. And we're starting to see more and more people that are like actually scholars in this field weigh in and say, whether you knew, like, if you didn't know that information, yeah, it makes it worse. But even if you did know it, labeling someone a member of a foreign terror organization does not authorize lethal force. Like that, that's not a thing. And I've seen some people go into the weeds of looking at military personnel of saying, like, somebody signed off on this, and we've got to find out why the military viewed this as a legitimate strike, because someone along the chain should have said, this is not in line with the law of war.
This is going to be this administration's torture thing. During Bush 1, there's a whole torture scandal. I don't know if anyone went to jail. I think they attempted to send people to jail, and then people kind of like disappeared, or they got them to drop the charges. But I think people will go to jail for this. If it is true that they killed civilians, even if they killed people who maybe were drug traffickers, but they have no proof. I mean, you just can't be like, what are we doing here? You just drone strike a boat, and nobody has any details as to who was there, how they know. When has that ever happened? Right? I mean, even... Yeah, go ahead.
So let me unpack this a little bit, because this is where I think the argument goes off the rails. And there was a good article in Just Security where a former attorney general, deputy attorney general for DOD and all this stuff, weighed in. And he said, look, even if you can 100% positively identify this as a boat coming from Venezuela full of drugs headed for the United States with members of Trinidad, like they've got their name tags on, if you can verify all of that stuff, it still likely was an illegal strike, because we are not engaged in an armed conflict with Trinidad. The labeling of a foreign terror organization does not open up the use of lethal force. It opens up diplomatic, legal, and financial resources that we can go after that organization. But the use of force in this case is exclusively tied to self-defense. So you now have to explain how these guys on this boat were a direct threat to the United States. And now the argument is, okay, well, if the drugs were coming to the United States and they would have been used in the, like, you're having to make new legal arguments, even if all of those data points are proven correct, which is where this guy is going. He's like, so assuming that every single thing they said is 100% spot on, easily provable, even then, you've got a long ways to go before you can show that this was a justified use of lethal force.
What is the name for military lawyers? Is what, JAGs? Is that what they're called? Yeah. So, I mean, this is what happens when you fire all the JAGs, right? You're conducting strikes, and now you don't know the legal authority for it. And I would say on their briefing, if the Republicans aren't saying anything about it, if they're not backing up the DOD, and it's just the Democrats saying they didn't give us this, and the Republicans aren't saying you're wrong, the Democrats are telling the truth. That's how you know, right? I would say it the same way. If the Republicans are saying they didn't tell us anything, and the DOD is saying we did, and the Democrats aren't backing up DOD, I would say the Republicans are telling the truth. I think that's how that works.
Here's where I start to get really nervous about this, is this does genuinely put at risk our service members from a legal perspective. So the precedent set in the Nuremberg trials was that you cannot, following orders is not something you can do. In the U.S. military, you have an obligation to not follow illegal orders. And if you do follow those orders, you can be found guilty and punished, sent to prison. So somewhere along the chain, something happened here, where what I just described means that there is, even if positive identification across the board, there is still a very real argument that it is not a legal strike. So someone along that kill chain either did not give accurate information or said that it was legal when it was not. There was a decision made, and I don't know, I mean, take your pick. If it was the president that said we're going for it, then it's Secretary Hegseth like reviewing the like somewhere a faulty decision was made and an illegal order was given based off the information we have right now. I don't know where that stops and where down the chain when it puts the service members in a tough spot of do I just believe that this was a legal strike and I have the authority to carry it out? At the end of the day, somebody pulled the trigger to launch that missile. So if starting at the president all the way down to the person that fired that missile to that boat to kill those people, somebody in there, and it could be a relatively low ranking, all things considered, military personnel that did something illegal. I hate that.
Well, it went all the way up, and then it came all the way down the chain. It happens, and then went all the way back up when they posted on social media to brag about it. Right?
Yeah.
So I would say in a just world, after this admin's over, I think Pete Kegbreath is probably going to jail, I would say. If not for this, for any of the other 9,000, the Signal Gate, which I've completely forgot happened until now.
Oh my God, so, yeah. So long ago.
Yeah, it is absurd. And this will come back to bite us. And I imagine in 10 years, 20 years, we're probably going to have to pay money to these families, these people who were just executed. I mean, they better hope it's like El Chapo on that boat, right? Because if it's not, ay caramba.
On that uplifting note, should we hit some questions?
Of course. Preston, what are some good military books?
I'm turning around here. We Were Soldiers, Once and Young, hard to beat. The ones I have here are like the ones that I have read and I keep. I get rid of a lot of books after I read them, they move on. We Were Soldiers, Once and Young, incredible book about, of course, the Vietnam War. Stephen Ambrose's D-Day, I think, is a really, really good like introduction and high-level overview of all of the events leading up to and shortly following June 6, 1944. I think it can be a little dry at times, but it covers so many different aspects. I think that's awesome. Trying to be very particular here. Ian Toll's The Conquering Tide, World War II in the Pacific. I think it's an incredible book that gets into that stuff. A couple that are kind of on the outliers, and we've talked about them before. Ordinary Men, I think, does a really good job of showing how regular people turned into bloodthirsty Nazis on the Eastern Front. I think that's incredible. And then just terrifying in a lot of ways. And then Blitzed, Norman Ohler, talking about the Germans' use of drugs during the war is I think, fascinating.
Yeah, those are all good. I would say Generation Kill, you can't go wrong with that one. That's a classic. That's a banger. A D-Day book, I like When the Sea Came Alive. But have you read that one? It kind of tells the story through quotes and statements of people at the time, from like citizenry to the soldiers to Churchill and FDR and Eisenhower. And you kind of just like bounce around, I always found that to be fascinating. I'm trying to think. I'm reading the Fort Bragg Cartel, which I guess is not really a military history book. It's just like a military book. But yeah, those are kind of mine. I mean, Directorate S, banger. You can never go wrong with a Steve Cole book. All right, next question.
Hold on, I got one more shout out here. Nick Laidlaw, Battles and Beers. You see the name of his book. I've got it on the shelf here. But Nick wrote an incredible book, first-person accounts from the opening days and weeks of the war in Ukraine. Stories from both Russians, Ukrainian soldiers, and Ukrainian civilians. I'll find that link. We'll put that in the description below. Nick's awesome. And like,
yes,
yeah, conducted every one of these interviews himself.
If I'll give a last controversial one here. This is one I read earlier this year. It is sharply, I would say it is sharply critical of the United States. And there are times where it made me mad and I disagree with the author, but there are other times where I was like, damn, he's got a point. It is Reign of Terror, How the 9/11 Era Destabilized America and Produced Trump, by Spencer Ackerman. It is one of the most sharply critical books I've ever read, but enough to where I was like, all right, I got to finish this. Like it's a mixed bag with things you'd be like, all right. So We will put what war did to us, though, in the description here. Preston, the next question is, you went to this counterterrorism summit or yes, and so I got the name right. So this person has 4 questions about it. Given the week, did the attacks on Poland and Qatar get discussed and takeaways on that? Also, did you know that we say Qatar differently? I know because my mom listens from time to time. I think she listens
Qatar.
every week. Yeah, and she says that we say it differently, and it really bothers her. And I
wait till she gets to the John Cena part. That's not gonna be good.
she's gonna drive her nuts. But apparently we say it differently. So how do you say Qatar?
Qatar.
Which way is right? Because you're saying Qatar, I'm saying Qatar. Do we know?
Can we find something in the middle? Let's see if we can find a middle ground on that one. I don't know what it would be,
but we'll call it Saudi Arabia. So given the week, did the attacks on Poland and Qatar get discussed and any takeaways on that?
Okay, so this was the Sufan Center Global Summit on Terrorism and Political Violence. It was the second one they've had. They hold it at Ground Zero. So there's a Perelman Performing Arts Center right there at like where the World Trade Centers or some of the buildings used to be. So you walk out and you're looking at the reflecting pools of Tower 1 and Tower 2. So last year they held it on September 11th. It's a 2-day event. This year was just a couple days prior. So the 9th and 10th. It's awesome event, man. It's a very kind of niche event. So there were former FBI directors there. We had the NYPD head of counterterrorism, the Port Authority head of counterterrorism, some former Israeli government officials. Like just kind of, we had a hostage, former Israeli hostage came in and spoke that was taken by Hamas on October 7th. So it's Lawrence Wright, who I've got his book back here, The Looming Tower. He spoke. So it's like within the counterterrorism community, it's a pretty incredible event. Qatar came up a little bit because that attack happened during the first day of the event. So we did have some people. They didn't necessarily change how they were presenting anything, but one of the people did use that to kind of further his point of saying he thinks Israel feels untouchable right now. And the strike in Qatar was just further evidence of that. But the programming didn't change because of that. I was absent for the first half of the second day because I was putting together videos talking about the strike in Poland. But by the time I did get there mid-morning, none of the events I saw the second day talked about that. It just wasn't the focus. I mean, there were deep dives on the how the 9/11 attackers reconned the buildings here in the United States, what the FBI is doing to work with local and state law enforcement to counter drone threats. There was a lot of stuff like that, and Russia, Ukraine just didn't come up a whole awful lot. Notably, however, the summit is called the Global Summit on Terrorism and Political Violence. Of course, September 10th saw a pretty notable act of political violence. Charlie Kirk was shot and killed. I was in the cab on the way to the airport when that happened. So I don't know if they broke that news during the last session. I missed the last 2 sessions. So I don't know if they broke that news at the event. My guess is that will play a pretty significant role next year in their event. And a lot of the people that were there, this is their, for lack of a better term, this is their cup of tea. Talking about extremism, violent extremism especially. So this is a group I would look to. Sufan Center certainly is going to have some pretty detailed analysis about that whole event.
You met Brian Driscoll there, right?
I did not meet him, but he was he was there in attendance, and his session was the one right before mine. Former FBI director.
That's crazy. So you said, oh, he's here, and then like the next day in the morning, he drops a lawsuit against the FBI and Kash Patel
did he
for
really?
illegal firing. And I was like, I wonder if he gave Preston like a heads up. He's like, hey,
we were talking about it.
Yeah.
We were talking about it.
So the next question
I did meet the foreign minister of the Afghan National Resistance Front, which was really cool. So he was there. Commander Massoud, the head of the Afghan National Resistance Front, gave a virtual briefing, just kind of an update on what's happening there. And off on the side, got to chat with, the head of their foreign ministry that's traveling abroad, and we're going to try to set something up to do an interview with him or Masood or someone from the NRF to kind of get an idea of what's going on in Afghanistan sometime soon.
Hell yeah, that rules. Question number 2: did the U.S. attack on that boat from Venezuela get discussed, and any takeaways on that?
I brought it up partially, but
No one cared.
no, I brought it up because I was trying to. My portion was talking about tech against terrorism. So it's how some organizations are sweeping social media, the public aspects of social media, like the things you post, sweeping that for terrorist content. And it was really cool. Adam Hadley runs that organization, and he was just talking about how it's insane, the volume. And they are pretty hyper focused on um, certain Islamic State branches. So they focus very exclusively in certain regions on certain groups. But he said the cartels are actually starting to get it's a crazy volume there as well. And I mentioned the strike in Venezuela as my segue to asking about cartels. But outside of that, I don't think it was brought up at all.
Interesting. So the third question they have here. Did you get your invite revoked to this event? No offense to our viewer here, but the third question is: did stochastics, terrorism, online radicalization, or lone wolf attacks in the U.S. get discussed, and any takeaways on that?
Oh man, too nuanced. I don't think so. Gosh, I wish they put up recordings of this. I think they did last year, and maybe they will eventually. But I wouldn't say lone wolf was a focus. That's kind of it's a theme throughout. There was a part of the discussion I was a part of where it's social media being utilized to radicalize one-off individuals to carry out this sort of attack. So it was always kind of back of mind, but I'm running through some of the sessions here, and the fire department talking about their capacity there, Port Authority, John O'Neill's son, former FBI agent. Nothing really dedicated to that. They had General Miller there talking about lessons from the battlefield, special operations, combating terrorism, stuff like that. But yeah.
Number 4, overall, did you think it was worthwhile as a trip? Maybe they submitted a survey, end of survey response as a question.
And I just didn't respond to it there, so they got it here.
Yeah. Overall, do you think it's worth the trip?
It was worthwhile. It's a really cool group. It's so for me personally, I joined the military, was interested in the military because of 9/11. And then, of course, started my military career at West Point. And then while at West Point, studied counterterrorism. I think they opened up the counterterrorism minor when I was junior. So I was the second year that you could do this terrorism minor. So to be at an event at Ground Zero right around 9/11, and in the audience were West Point cadets from the Counterterrorism Center. And I got to chat with some of the instructors there at West Point and meet the cadets in this role. It's just, kind of like a lot of things coming together is kind of, I would go again. I didn't participate in it last year. I just got to attend. I would attend and just listen again because it's a really unique experience. And honestly, there's not a lot of groups. Counterterrorism is not sexy. People don't focus on this stuff until something happens and then we go crazy. So I really like having these connections, even if it's the event once a year or twice a year, whatever it ends up being, to kind of tap back into that and get an idea of what is happening in the CT world.
You know where I think you'd be a great speaker? At the Council of Foreign Relations. I listen to their stuff all the time, and they occasionally have someone come on who, they're like, how do we reach the youth? How do we get them to buy into this broader U.S. vision of foreign policy? And it's always a guy who was a guy there who managed an embassy's social media. And they're talking about they're an expert. And I was just you guys have no idea.
The key is hashtags. Yeah, it's hashtags. You got to have the right hashtag and you'll reach the youth.
They could benefit greatly. Okay. Between the two of us, we've built entities with 15 million viewers. We could, the Council of Foreign Relations could use us. The Blob could.
There we go.
But they'd have to call it the Unclassified Council.
Sponsoring the next episode.
They better. So this last question here is, and I want to answer first on this one.
Yeah, good,
Do you
because these
think?
have all been directed to me, and this is not how these questions are supposed to go.
Well, I love. Well, recently, so just this week they've said, "Hey Ben and Preston, I have a question for Preston." And I go, "Okay, well, all right. Well, I guess I'm just the oracle. I'll just ask the questions." This one says, "Do you think that if Kamala was president, Russia wouldn't have attacked Poland?" And my answer is, Russia does not care who the president of the United States is. Vladimir Putin is going to continue to do this. It does not matter if it's Trump as president or Kamala Harris. I don't know if the exact events would have taken place, but like what's happening here is Putin does not take, perhaps the walking down of our NATO stuff that was revealed will have an impact going forward. But what happened with the drones in Poland, I do not believe has any effect. Anyone who claims that a war wouldn't have happened because of them is high. What do you think?
I think this type of probing has always been something Putin and Russia have wanted to do. It's the smart move on their part to try this out. So I think it was likely if Harris had been president, we have to then make I think the smart assumption is that aid to Ukraine would have generally continued. It would have been very much just a continuation of Biden's policies, is probably the smart way to view that. If so, I would think that the alliance would not be as fractured right now as it is. So maybe that testing doesn't come now, but later. But to get to that point, I've got to string together like 6 different hypotheticals, because I don't think they did it because Trump is president. I think they did it now because of a series of policies and reactions over the last 7 months.
I agree. Yep, I fully agree. Preston, do you have any parting word? Oh, so we had to tell the people. You all got to follow us on Instagram. Okay. Follow Preston, but also follow me. For the life of me, no matter what I do, I cannot get people to follow me on Instagram. Now over on TikTok.
I do not consume on Instagram, so I do follow you, but I don't post there, so I don't consume content there.
Well, that's because like you're an elder millennial.
Yeah.
But for us, Zillennials, I guess I'm just Gen Z. I would like if more people followed me there because it's like social proof,
Okay.
So I appreciate if you guys did that. But also, more importantly, you need to like, comment, subscribe, give us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple, leave us nice reviews, combat the evil people over there in Apple reviews. It just it's like a magnet over there, just mean, gross people. And unless they give 5 stars, then we like them, right? Anyways, so we will see you all next week, and God knows what we're going to talk about. All right, peace.